Hanna Moreland, and I was awarded the David P. Burhan Civic Fellowship for the summer of 2015. Thank you. I'd just like to start with giving a quick shout out to Dr. Burhan, who's actually been a great friend and mentor to me ever since I was a freshman here at the university. So it's been a great honor for me to be able to complete this project in his name. Okay, so coming in, speaking of little freshman me, I had this sort of random career goal of becoming a genetic counselor, specifically for pediatrics. And what this entails is working with kids that are born with genetic disorders and helping them and their families to understand their condition, its implications, and possible treatment options for them. I'd also love to incorporate genetic research to find even more effective treatment options for people with these conditions. So obviously I'm a huge science nerd. Genetics in particular are really interesting to me. I actually work in a lab here on campus for the evolution of frogs. So this was a huge passion of mine. I also loved studying Spanish in high school, so I knew I wanted to pursue that language more in college. But there was one perspective that I wasn't anticipating, and that was public health. Towards the end of my freshman year, I came across Richmond's Sophomore Scholars in Residence program. Specifically the Global Health, Medical Humanities, and Human Rights program taught by Dr. Mays. I applied and was accepted, and I quickly entered into this class where we lived and learned together about public health, both nationally and internationally. We did service projects both in Western Virginia and also in the Dominican Republic that really started for me this passion about providing public health and the need for it, both in our own country and abroad. This also inspired me to go abroad in the fall of my junior year with the School of International Training. I, along with 30 students from around the U.S., went on the International Honors Program for Health and Community, where we studied medical anthropology in India, South Africa, and Brazil. So obviously all of these different converging interests were all going on at once, and looking at the end of my junior year and coming into my senior year, I wasn't sure how I was going to fit all of these things together and if that was going to be something that I really wanted to pursue in my future career. So in applying for the fellowship, I turned to Dr. Mays to advise me as to what would be something I'd be really interested to do, but also something that was applicable to what I had been studying. And Dr. Mays, thankfully, has a lot of connections to Peru and Cusco in particular. He's made multiple academic and personal trips there and has just a wealth of resources. And he suggested that I look into La Clínica San Juan de Dios. This is part of a huge international chain of hospitals. You can find them all around the world. They're religiously affiliated and very well funded. Usually some of the highest quality facilities in the area where they are located. This clinic in Cusco in particular has a program that offers free shelter, clothing, food, and therapy for kids that were born with developmental disabilities. And so this is where I chose to focus my fellowship. Now the kids themselves, they were all unable to walk, so they were all in wheelchairs. But apart from that, they had a range of different disabilities. Some of them, like Wilma up here in the pink, she's completely blind. Some of them were mute, like Amy in the red there. And some had physical deformities, some had, there's a range of mental capacities. And this was really intimidating for me at first. I had never worked with children that had developmental disabilities before, and I was also alone in a foreign country, speaking a language that was not native to me. So I was thinking, how am I going to be able to do this? How can I connect to these kids? And how can I work to make a difference while I'm here? And luckily, this concern faded very quickly. These are 100% normal kids. They just want to play with you and have a good time. But the challenge was that you had to find a way to communicate with each kid individually. It wasn't as easy as just walking in there and playing hide and go seek. You really had to find a way to communicate with them on their own level, and once you did that, it was just more rewarding than I could possibly explain. while I was in Peru, I also had the opportunity to volunteer for a week with the Richmond Global Health Alliance. They had a rural health campaign that they had organized in the Sacred Valley, which is only 2 hours outside of Cusco, where I was staying with clinic. So this coalition brought together 2 medical doctors from the University of Chicago, as well as 2 VCU medical students, and 7 physician assistants in training. And the goal was to provide clinical hours to rural villages and free medication when necessary. Going into this, I was the only undergraduate student, so I was scared I'd be breaking the #1 rule of international service, which is if you have nothing to contribute, you probably shouldn't be there. And so I had no technical training in medicine. I wasn't sure, what exactly my role would be. But similarly to what happened in the clinic, I soon realized that I did have a role in something I could contribute. In fact, I was the only student that spoke Spanish fluently. So I was able to distract the kids when they weren't being seen by the doctor playing games. I was able to do intake forms, and I was also, my favorite part actually, was translating between the doctor and the patient within the clinic itself. And I just want to touch upon one case that was particularly striking to me. This was towards the end of the week, and towards the end of the day actually, when a father brought in his 2 twin boys around 7 years old. One of the boys had been having a bedwetting problem for the past couple of months, and the other was having some behavioral issues. So the fellow students and I were doing like a pre-checkup before the doctor got there, and we sort of focused on the bedwetter, thinking this is obviously the more prominent case, this is something that the doctor's going to want us to be focusing on. However, when the doctor got there, it turned out he really wasn't interested at all in the bedwetter. He said this is just a phase, the kid's going to grow out of it, it doesn't matter. But he did focus on the other brother. And the more I started translating his questions for the father, the more confused I got. Throughout the course of the week, I had never had to ask these types of questions, and I wasn't sure where he was going with this line of questioning. Until he asked me to tell the father that he thinks that his child has autism. And this kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. I didn't even know how to say autism in Spanish, which is kind of necessary in explaining it. But also, I started to go over the implications of this diagnosis, especially in this rural town, where I know that they're so far hours away from resources. I know that he has siblings that the parents also have to care for, in addition to working and supporting their family. So it was really difficult. And then when I started to explain it to the father as best as possible, he had never even heard of autism. So that made it even more difficult to accomplish this task. And in the process of doing that, though, I realized that this was the intersection that I was looking for in planning this project. I wanted something that was going to test my ability to be in this moment and complete what I needed to do. I was diagnosing a child with a genetic disorder in an international country in a foreign language, and I could do it. I wasn't able to actually go on and give, medical support, but I was able to complete the task at hand. And it was difficult to do, but I did have the doctors there to support me, and they said, this diagnosis is not always the end of the world for a parent. In fact, oftentimes parents have this nagging feeling that something's wrong with their kid and they're not really sure what it is. So when you actually give them a name and give them a diagnosis, it's almost a sense of relief that finally they're not crazy. They knew something was wrong and now they know what it is, and they can use that as a jumping off point to further investigate the diagnosis and help their child as much as possible. So that sort of put my mind at ease in the fact that, yes, I can do it. Yes, it is difficult, but there is value in there, and there is something that I could see myself doing. So this future career goal, which was seemingly random, doesn't seem so random to me anymore. I'm so passionate about being able to pursue this career and follow up on what I've been learning this summer. I'd like to continue with the ties internationally, specifically to Cusco. I really loved it. It was so beautiful, as you can see from these pictures. The people were incredibly nice and welcoming. I really felt like I became a part of their community there. And despite the obstacles I faced and the challenges and uncertainty of working and living alone in a foreign country with a language that wasn't my own, I know now that I had the strength to overcome it, and I had the strength to push through it, and really do my best to make a difference. And so that is why I would love to continue this work. I'm optimistic about the fact that it really does make a difference. And I would like to thank the CCE, Dr. Burhans, Dr. Mays, and everyone that supported me throughout this whole journey, because it really has changed who I am.